Welcome to the last session of the day, Arctic Investment Structures. And as Inga said, I'm Jørn Nielsen, Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Industry, Labour and Trade. And I will start by giving a short presentation on the Greenland government's policy in this area, a little bit about a few examples of some of the investment projects, some of the new credit facilities that have been set up lately. Some of it will be a little bit touching upon areas that you have heard about earlier, because some of the workshops are a bit overlapping. So I'll do it quickly. Investment in Greenland, a little bit about a perspective on some large infrastructure projects and investment opportunities, but also a little bit about new investment facilities and so on. The government of Greenland has a policy to stimulate growth and employment. We've heard a lot about the need for that. We do have unemployment in Greenland as many places in the world. So right now we are working very hard in close cooperation, amongst others, with the Danish government to establish competitive, stable frameworks in the legislation. We are working on a new national strategy on tourism. You heard about that. That was the first session today. We have set up together with the Danish government new credit facilities so that credit facilities in the future should be less of a barrier once you want to initiate new investments in Greenland. And further, the government of Greenland has special attention on, as I said, modernizing the business legislation. On the parliament session that is going on right now in the Greenland Parliament, there's a lot of new acts on modernizing the business legislation of Greenland in order to make it more compatible with what happens internationally in EU, Denmark, and other places, so that the investors actually know and are familiar with the rules and regulations in the business area. So, I think you've heard a lot about it. 2 new airports are some of the new projects we need to invest in the years to come. The Parliament has approved the government's plan to build 2 new runways in Ilulissat and Nuuk with a length of 2,200 meters, and they need to go out and finance that in the months to come. The present infrastructure system is based on an old structure from the Second World War. The airport we have in Kangerlussuaq, or Sønderstrømfjord, where you fly into, was actually established during World War II as an American base. The problem is that when you fly into Kangerlussuaq, I don't know if you can see it over here in the slides over there, it's quite cheap to fly in per seat kilometer when you fly with a big aeroplane to Sønderstrømfjord. But then you have today to move over to small aeroplanes like a Dash 8, which means that the cost per seat goes up quite rapidly, which means that the whole cost and price of traveling to Greenland is way too high. So basically right now, the reason why we are extending exactly the runways in Nuuk and Ilulissat is that at least 57% of the passengers that go to Greenland or from Greenland goes to these 2 towns or through these 2 towns. So even without calculating a growth potential, you will have a massive reduction in the costs of those already traveling by making longer runways in exactly these 2 towns. And as I think I actually mentioned earlier this day, this will reduce the cost of traveling to Greenland with 30% at least. That gap could be even greater or bigger if you actually have an increase in the number of people traveling to Greenland. We have, in the last year, been able to provide new credit facilities for the businesses operating in Greenland. The Danish Export Credit Fund has now been opened for Greenland. It's a fund whereby the Danish state actually guarantees export projects with a AAA credit rate. It is an arrangement whereby if you have a big, for instance, a mine project or another infrastructure, or another big industrial project, you can actually, if you use suppliers from Denmark, Greenland, get a credit arrangement with the Danish Credit Fund in order to make sure that you are guaranteed your payment as a as a supplier to these projects. So that's a very important new credit facility that is now opening in Greenland. Also, Nordic Investment Bank has now set up an Arctic financing framework, and also we're talking a lot to the European Investment Bank. We visited them earlier this year, and we're very interested in talking more with them about the new European Fund for Strategic Investments, which we think also will be very suitable for what happens in Greenland. Well, you heard about this before. I just want to mention water and ice in the terms of being the source of hydropower plants for the source of production of clean energy. We have a lot of potential for that. We have a special report made some years ago, which is being updated right now, but we have estimated that we have at least 50 potential sources for hydropower plants, and at least 17 of those have a potential of more than 100 megawatts. And even the largest one of those actually have a power base of more than 300 megawatt. So some of them are very, very large in terms of the electricity that they can produce. Already we have in the domestic power supply 70% of the power supplied by hydropower plants, but there is actually the potential for unlocking energy-intensive industry that needs clean, cheap energy. And that can be done for the aluminium industry, the steel industry, the mining industry, and we are actually in dialogue with potential investors for some of these sources of energy, clean energy, which is important also when you consider the COP21 result, where in the future you must expect that cheap energy where you don't have to buy quotas is something that will come in a big demand. Right now we are focusing on marketing in the Asian area, 3 very big lakes on the west coast of Greenland, and we are having Asian investors coming later this year to look at it. Those are potentials that have until now been looked upon by the American aluminum smelter company Alcoa. They have actually demonstrated that it can supply enough power to substantiate a big aluminum smelter that will produce 400,000 tons each year. However, right now, the aluminum market is not good, low prices. You have an excess production capacity on the world scale. So we are marketing those very large potential towards other industries right now. So that was a little bit about the government policy in the area.